Welcome everybody to the 7th annual Ariel Avrech lecture. Young Israel of Century City was Ariel's home. He loved this shul dearly and he loved all its members. In publicizing today's lecture, Karen and I indicated that Ariel, having developed a keen political and social awareness early on, was a fan of Dennis Prager's radio program. We recalled a specific event when Ariel was so involved with this discussion on Dennis's program that he picked up the cell phone, he called the screener because he had to say something. We were in the elevator at the time of Cedars-Sinai on the way to a doctor's appointment. Unfortunately, the screener had to put Ariel on hold, and then Ariel had to hang up because he was being hooked up for chemotherapy. The choice of Dennis as our speaker is meaningful, but so is the topic of happiness. As a mitzvah, for Ariel pursued happiness as intensely as he pursued Torah and mitzvot. He refused to be vanquished or depressed by his illness. Karen and I want to give you some examples, since, like all Torah, it is the doing, the act, that is important, not the lip service or the thought. The week before Ariel was diagnosed, but already symptomatic with headaches, he was excited to participate in his first yeshivish Purim, wearing a full-body costume of Cookie Monster. This involved a headpiece that was immensely uncomfortable. He was sweating and he was flushed, but he endured the discomfort because the merriment was a mitzvah. When Ariel was home for a year from Ner Yisrael, waiting for the lung transplant that never happened, he was full of hope and he talked of raising a family. He said he wanted 5 daughters, named for the expressions of happiness: Gila, Rina, Ditza, Chedva, and Ahava. As he grew progressively weaker, Ariel attended a friend's wedding. He was overjoyed to go, and even though he couldn't dance, his friends danced around him in a circle of love and joy. Ariel never complained. I was with him. I was carrying his portable oxygen. He was thrilled when he could harmonize with his friends in welcoming the chassan and kala. Even as he lay in intensive care, and Karen witnessed it, he greeted a surprise visit from a former Rebbe, whom we hadn't seen since he was 7 years old. He cried, "Rebbe, Rebbe, how are you?" The Rebbe was dumbfounded. He expected to see a crying, mournful scene, but all he could say was, "You recognize me?" When a friend visited from New York, imparting the news that he had just become engaged, there was no self-pity that he had been left behind. Instead, Ariel excitedly gushed, "Tell me all about it." Michael Jackson, another radio host, was visiting the ICU and he interviewed Ariel. Afterwards, he told Karen, "That young man certainly has high ambitions." Ariel was very wise. He knew as time passed that things were not going well, but he refused to surrender to despair. When he did speak of the worst scenario, his words were ones of gratitude. Incredible for one so young. He said, "I've had a good life." He seemed to know that happiness is a mitzvah. The Avrech family thanks all our friends who have contributed to this lecture series over the years. Your support and friendship are a direct reflection of your love and respect for Ariel Chaim, and we are deeply touched by your generosity. Special welcome to my mother-in-law, Rebbetzin Celia Singer, who flew in from New York to attend this lecture. Also flying in from New York, our daughter Aliza and her husband Ash, and Ash's parents, Glenn and Karen Cohn. A special mazel tov to Aliza and Ash on their graduation from college, Aliza from Stern, Ash from Touro. Planning this lecture is a big job, and without Young Israel of Century City's hard-working staff, nothing would get done. So thank you to Tanya and to Rebecca Jalali, who is also my invaluable source for all things regarding Bollywood, the Indian film industry, which I adore, because all their films are happy. Thank you to Debbie Goldenberg and Judy Kandel for the lovely flower arrangements in the social hall. Finally, during Ariel's long illness, there was one man who always stood by Ariel's side, a man who could always be counted on for spiritual support and common sense advice. Rabbi Elazar Muskin is not just a friend to the Avrech family, but a pillar of our lives here in Los Angeles. Ariel was proud to call Rabbi Muskin his Rav. This morning's program will proceed as follows. Dennis will deliver his lecture, followed by a brief question and answer period. There will be no Kel Malei Rachamim this year because today is Rosh Chodesh, and happy Rosh Chodesh to you all. Rabbi Muskin will recite Kapita Tehillim, and then I will recite Kiddush Yatom. Then you are all invited to the brunch in the social hall. The lecture is being videotaped, and in a few days, your friends can download it from our blog, Seraphic Secret, or from the Young Israel's website. Dennis Prager is widely sought after by television shows for his opinions. He's appeared on Larry King Live, Hardball, Hannity's America, CBS Evening News, The Today Show, and many others. Dennis is the author of several bestsellers, including the seminal work on anti-Semitism, Why the Jews, co-written with Joseph Telushkin. By the way, we all went to Yeshiva Flatbush together, and I always looked up to Dennis, literally, because he was the tallest guy in Yeshiva. Dennis also wrote Happiness is a Serious Problem, Think a Second Time, and the 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism, also co-written with Joseph Telushkin. More important to us is personal connection. As we said, Ariel was an enthusiastic fan of Dennis's radio show. During our son's long illness, when he was confined at home and in the hospital, Ariel listened to Dennis on a daily basis, and one day he turned to me and commented, "There is a lot of Torah in what Dennis says." The title of Dennis's lecture is Happiness is a Mitzvah, Not an Emotion. Let us now, as eternal friends of Ariel, celebrate his memory. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present Dennis Prager.
Thank you very, very much. A lot of people asked me, I had surgery on Friday, and this is the first lecture that I'm standing in 6 months. I've had such terrible sciatic problems. The doctor said that it was so large what he took out, he thought he was delivering a baby. That was actually said by both the nurse and the anesthesiologist. And so friends and my son said, "You're going to speak on Sunday?" I think if you heard the introduction and know what this is about, you'll understand why I would literally have to be wheeled in not to have spoken today. This is a very touching moment for me to know that your beloved Ariel listened to my show, liked it and called in but never quite got in. Is very, very moving to me. Let me tell you, though, a great and truly perhaps one of the 2-3 funniest stories in 28 years of radio was a young Jewish boy. He then was young. He's today married and he's having a child. He and his wife are having a child. And he was an Orthodox Jew as well, who was listening to the show. He was a teenager at the time. I think it was at Eula. And he was listening to my first show, which many of you remember, Religion on the Line, where I was the moderator for a priest, minister, rabbi each week. And I had said something which ran counter to some of the principles, perhaps, that he thought he had learned, or maybe did, at yeshiva. So he called me up and he said, "Dennis," and he was unbelievably respectful. He said, "Dennis, I love your show. I love you, but I just can't agree on some of the takes you have on Judaism. There's a book I would love you to read on Judaism." And I said, "Okay, tell me, what is it?" He said, "Well, it's called The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism." I could not make this up. And I remember, it is very rare in my radio career to be speechless. And you know what my debate was? How bad do I make him feel? Because I'm taught, and I even wrote this piece for the Jewish Journal where I've started writing a column six months ago. I'm guided very much by if you humiliate somebody publicly, it's as if you killed them. So I had to protect this boy's dignity because I could have clobbered him. I wrote the book that he is suggesting to me. And so I gently said, "Well, Zach," that's his real name. "Well, Zach, I know that book well. In fact, I wrote it." And at that moment, you hear at the other end of the phone, "Oh." And the clergy, not known for falling off their chairs in laughter. I mean, we did not have, knee-slapping subjects on religion on the line. They just went crazy, and it was so whenever I hear from kids, or Jewish kids in particular, I always get a big kick, and I wish I would have heard from him. It would have been a treasured memory for me. I want to say to Rabbi Muskin and to members of the Young Israel of Century City, this is a homecoming for me. I sat back there for many years when I lived in this area. I have wonderful memories, and it's wonderful to be back. Rabbi Muskin was the Mesadar Kedushin at a wedding of a member of my cousin's son just 2 weeks ago in New Jersey. We were together then. So may we only be together, as they say, for happy occasions. I always have an ambivalence about that. We should only know simchas. It's so unrealistic, that wish. The human condition doesn't allow only for simchas. So it's a cute line, but I must say I have a little ambivalence with regard to it. But what I would say is, may our simchas outnumber our misery by a great factor. But I don't know how to do that in Yiddish. It's I don't know, it's a little too philosophical, perhaps, but that's how I look at it. Now, let me tell you about this subject because this has been the greatest single change in my life, my view of the subject of happiness and what I've done with it. Any of you who do listen to my show on any regular basis know I have devoted an hour a week, no matter what happens. And I begin that hour, second hour Fridays, with, I don't care if there are frogs, vermin, lice, smiting of the firstborn. And I go through, most of the 10 plagues and say, no matter what, I talk about happiness. I talked about happiness, I do believe. I'm not certain. I think I did it even on the Friday of 9/11, which was a Tuesday. That is how important I consider happiness. This is a total change in my view. And let me tell you what happened, because this goes to the nub of the issue here. And let me also say in advance, while it is not intended, and I never intend to bother people, I will bother some people with this talk. It's intended to shake people up, but it's not intended to hurt anybody. But if you are regularly moody, this won't be your favorite hour. I need to tell you that, but it might be the best hour of your life, because you might desire to do something about it because of the importance of what I'm about to say. Of course, you may, on the other hand, disagree. I gave this talk on happiness, obviously with a different title. I didn't, because it was 99% non-Jews, but a very, very sophisticated pre-college, one of these places that produces Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Berkeley type kids in the Flint Ridge area up near Pasadena. Some Republican kids, there were about 8 in the school, invited me, and they invited me because they wanted me to make a case for conservative politics and conservative values. But they said, obviously, Dennis, whatever you talk about is fine with us. Came the day, and my wife, who's with me today, was there, and she can bear testimony. They said, so what are you talking on? I said, happiness. And they were visibly shaken, as if that's what we went through, all this work to bring you here, and you're going to talk about happiness, not about conservative politics? And I said, I promise you, this will be more controversial and more significant than anything that I could say about politics. And I was right. I caused, according to the school, the biggest furor of any speaker who had ever come to speak, and all I did was say that you have a moral obligation to be happy. It runs so counter to what children are raised to do, which is live by their feelings, that I shattered them and their teachers. Teachers took issue with me. One teacher got up, I love this. He got up and he spoke to me about how great the unhappy have been in history. Like if it weren't for Mahler's unhappiness, we would never have his symphonies. Well, he started with the wrong guy on music. I'm a part-time conductor. I know every key of all 9 Mahler symphonies plus the unfinished 10th. So I'm sure I knew Mahler better than the teacher did. And so I discussed with him some of the symphonies, and I'm sure he was blown away. Really blown away and unhappy. But besides which, he's not right. Bach was extremely happy. I mean, there is no correlation whatsoever between greatness and unhappiness. It's just a myth. It's a myth that the unhappy use to justify their state. We would have great art if people were happy. All right? I mean, but we wouldn't have genocide if people were happy. We wouldn't have lynchings if people were happy. We wouldn't have anti-Semitism if people were happy. I'll trade in Mahler's Sixth, because it's called The Tragic, for less hatred on earth. Happy people don't walk around hating groups. I'll delineate in a moment the point, but let me go back to my own personal odyssey. When I first began lecturing, which was very young, at the age of 21, and then I was only on Soviet Jewry the first 3 years, but then I gradually branched out to other subjects, and finally to a whole host of subjects like now. And people would say, do you want to speak on happiness? And I'd say, no. You want to write a book on happiness? No, I don't want to. And I would say, why? I believe that the only people who got happier from lectures on happiness and books on happiness were the lecturers and the authors as they cashed their checks. I was convinced of that. And I had the same view of happiness that I'm sure many of you do. It's nice to be happy, but it's not a moral goal. A moral goal is to be honorable, is to have integrity, is to tell the truth, is to be a loyal friend. There are a whole host of issues that make us good, but not happiness. Happiness is, I regard it as a personal, psychological, selfish quest. I want to be happy, but what do you care, right? That's how I viewed it. So what happened was, and I give credit to this very often, to this man. Some of you will know Schwartzy. That's how he's known in Los Angeles, the great Chabad rabbi, Schwartzy, who ran Chabad at the time. This is 20-something years ago, about 23 years ago. He ran Chabad for UCLA. Called me up one day, said, Dennis, would you speak for our students here? And I said, Rabbi Schwartzy, for you, anything. I said, you want me to speak on Judaism? He said, what, are you kidding? Nobody will show up. So, which was true and sad. So I said, so what do you want me to speak on? He said, oh, something light. I said, like what? He said, like happiness. And so help me God as I stand on a bima in a shul. I said to him, but Schwartzy, happiness is not a light subject. Happiness is a serious problem. To which he said, great subject. That title became the title of my book, and in almost every instance, the title of my lecture on the subject, thanks to that interchange between Rabbi Schwartzy and me. So I gave a talk to UCLA Jewish students titled, Happiness is a Serious Problem. I don't know how many showed up. It was not standing room only, I can assure you. Be that as it may, I brought my recorder. I was sure I would never give another talk on happiness, and I record all my talks. I just do, which is a very good thing because I'm misquoted often, and then I have proof whether I am misquoted or not. But aside from that, for 30 years, I have been sending out my lectures to people who subscribe to my lectures. And so I take the best of the month and send them out. So I figured if this is good, I'll send this one out. So different from everything else I was talking about, God's existence, good and evil, etc. And so not only did I like it, but I did something I never did before and have never done since. I listened to my own talk through the entire talk when I got home. I have never done, I don't like hearing me any more than you like hearing you. I'm glad you like hearing me. I make a living, thank God, doing that. But I do not like hearing me. And so I listened to it. Not only did I listen to it, but I kept going, yeah, good point. That's a good point. I was listening to somebody else tell me things about happiness. That's how much I liked it. Well, I made it available. I made it available to the subscribers. Never thought about it again. Half a year later, I receive a call Dennis Prager? Yes. Oh, boy, I've been hunting you down. This is, and I don't remember her name, was an Italian-American woman. This is so-and-so from Red Book magazine in New York. I was sure it was a wrong number. Why would Red Book magazine call me? So she said, I heard your lecture on happiness. I said, really? That's great. You subscribe to my lectures? She said, I never heard of you in my life. Of course, I didn't subscribe. I heard it on the radio here in New York. I said, you heard my lecture on happiness on the radio in New York? She said, you didn't know? Turns out that at the time, this Jewish-run station, WEVD, basically a bunch of Ganovim. Essentially, a bunch of crooks. They did something for which they could lose their license. They played an entire lecture with no permission, forget no fee. Believe me, I would have given them permission. I would have paid them to do it. But it's totally illegal, absolutely illegal what they did. Thanks to these crooks, my life has changed, and I have changed thousands of lives because of the happiness issue. Because if this Red Book lady didn't hear it, nothing would have ever developed on this subject. To show you in life the importance of letting roads take you rather than you only taking the preset roads. So anyway, I said to her, oh, wow, I'm glad you heard it. She said, I sat in my car in the front of my brownstone on the east side till it was finished and find out who it was. So I said, thank you, that's great. Would you like to write an article for Red Book? And I said, I'll never forget, I said, on what? I had no idea. She said, what do you mean on what? On happiness. So I said, yeah, okay, I will. So then she said, and I will never forget this either, she said, is $3,000 okay? Now you have to understand, first of all, this is 25 years ago or so. And it's an immense amount today for an article. Forget 25 years ago. But you have to understand, when I would write for commentary, do you know what I would receive? 6 issues of commentary. I would get 6 copies of that issue to give to friends and relatives. And do you know my reaction? My reaction was, I was right. The only people who get happy from happiness lectures and from happiness books are the authors as they cash their checks. This is more than I had ever made in all of my article writing put together. So I said, oh, that's fine. Look, had the woman said $11.62, I would have said fine. It wouldn't have mattered. Anyway, I wrote the article, was published in Red Book. Then I got a call from Reader's Digest, a long story. Now I'll make it much shorter. Reader's Digest said, can we abridge your article and put it in our international editions? And I thought, that's really exciting. You know, me in Estonian. It's a great feeling, you know? I said, oh, absolutely, go ahead. Then I got a call from Random House. We'd like you to write a book. I said, book? I'm lucky I had an article. What do you mean a book? Said, no, these are great ideas. And people, meantime, had been reacting to the lecture more than any other lecture I ever gave. And so I thought, maybe I do have something to say here, so I'll test it out. And I decided to give an 8-session course on happiness at the University of Judaism, which I did. I test, do I have 8 90-minute statements to make? I did. Then I still wasn't sure I had a book. I gave us 16 sessions. That's 16 times 90 minutes is 24 hours. If I could speak 24 hours with no baloney, no fat on happiness, then I was convinced to myself that I had a book on happiness. I said yes to Random House. 5 years later, I didn't have the book. I gave them all their money back, which is painful, because needless to say, it was spent. And then finally, HarperCollins asked again, and it was published with HarperCollins. My whole point, and it is worth giving the story, is I have come 180 degrees from seeing happiness as a selfish pursuit and a feeling to a moral good. One of the great moral goods. In fact, and I don't mean to be to self-aggrandize in any way. I'm not comparing myself to Marx or Freud, but what Marx is to economics and Freud is to sex or the psyche, I am to happiness. I believe that happiness explains more than economics or even the psyche. That's how powerful I believe this subject is, and I am happy to speak about it to anyone, anywhere, at any time. By the way, I want to just give you a very interesting Christian-Jewish difference, because I spent half my life with Christians and half my life with Jews. I am not only bilingual Christian-Jewish, but I'm bicultural. I mean, I have even said grace before meals for Protestants. That's how good I got. I mean, that was when I really said, boy, I tell you, for a yeshiva Flatbush graduate, this is nachas. Anyway, I have deep reverence for the Christians of America, as many of you know, and for very good reason. But anyway, I spoke about this subject at a Baptist seminary in Texas. And the title was, Unhappiness is a Sin. Notice the topic for a Jewish audience is happiness is a mitzvah. We're mitzvah preoccupied, they're sin preoccupied. One is not better than the other. It's just fascinating, because if I came and said unhappiness is an avera, you'd think I was a kook. Half of you wouldn't show up. Dennis has lost his mind. But it's a mitzvah. That's good. But there is no mitzvah term in Christianity, so I had to use, the term that they would relate to. But it is a sin, and happiness is a mitzvah. So let me tell you essentially why. The happy make the world better. The unhappy make the world worse. This is amazingly true, both micro and macro. It is true in micro, your family life, your friendships, your business life, and it is true macro. I would argue to you, and you should read one of the 10 books that changed my life, and it's on my website, those 10 books, is Raphael Patai's book, The Arab Mind. And this is not a happy civilization. The Arab world is not a happy world. Any of you who grew up there would probably assent. Doesn't mean there were no happy Arabs. Of course there are. But the world, the way in which children are raised often, and the world is not a happy world. And on the more radical fringes, Hamas, their motto is, we love death as much as the Jews love life, which is true. That's exactly right. Now, folks, you can't argue that those who love death are happy, because a defining element of happiness is loving life. I mean, if that isn't a defining element, then the word happiness is meaningless. So it is a big deal, this notion. Americans have generally been regarded as happier than Europeans. This is somewhat changing, and I think for very good reason. But if you want to ask later. But in fact, Europeans look at Americans as too happy, because we're not serious. They're serious, the Europeans. They read Schopenhauer and other philosophers who cause people to commit suicide if they're taken seriously. But Americans are busy dancing to jazz. Jazz is the happiest music ever written, and it was developed not only by Americans but by blacks who had a very unhappy experience in America. That's the irony. Until the idea was created, partially in large measure by baby boomers, of which I am a member, though a dissenting member since college, not high school. The notion was self-pity was very important. Self-pity is a major, I think it's the single biggest cause of evil in the world. Of evil. People who think that they are victims feel that they are free to hurt others. The whole Nazi thing is we're victims of Jews. We're victims. The whole ideology of the Islamic extremist is we're victims. And we're being killed. Muslims are being killed in Afghanistan. Muslims are being killed in Iraq. Genocide in the Palestinian territories, and so on. Hyperventilating about their suffering as if it's unique. That's the reason they're so angry about the Holocaust. Because, hey, that means the Jews are victims, and we can't allow that. We have to have a monopoly on victimhood. We never claimed a monopoly on victimhood, we Jews. I mean, we fully acknowledge what happened to Armenians, what happened to the Rwandans, and what happened to the Cambodians. I mean, it's a non-issue. The biggest event for the Afghans when they were being slaughtered en masse was done with the Tolerance Museum. Remember that? We did that many years ago, about 30 years ago, when they were being slaughtered by the Soviets. So the notion, Jews don't walk around. I have a lot of problems with my fellow Jews on political issues, but one that I don't is that we're the only victims. I wish, on the contrary, there are many Jews who don't even want to believe Jews are victims when they are, which is a separate issue for another time. So I am convinced that this notion of feeling a moral obligation to be happy because happy people make the world better is if not the solution to humanity's problems. There are many other issues. Obviously, you need a good value system. But here, I'll prove it to you in your own lives. When is it you feel you want to do the most good? You know the answer. When something particularly good happens to you. How do you translate? 99% of people translate something very happy happening in their lives. They want to share it with as many people as possible, and they want to do good for others. You know, believe me, if you had just won a big amount of money, I bet you would leave a bigger tip at the next restaurant that you sat at. Why? Not because the person will say you're a great man or a great woman, just because you want to share some of the joy that you have had. The happy want to make others happy. That's a defining element of being happy. Unfortunately, the miserable want to make other people miserable, and that's a defining element of unhappiness. And they're better at it. It is much easier to make people unhappy than to make other people happy. You can't make other people happy, but you can make other people miserable. That's the case with children. You know the old line wherein we're no happier than our least happy child, which I have something to say about. I do in a moment. But that is because 10 happy kids, you have 11 children, 10 happy kids cannot undo the damage that the one unhappy does to you. However, I completely dissent from that view. If you let one child out of 2, out of 5, out of 7 make you unhappy, I blame you, not the child. You have the perfect right to say, I am out of this. You have no longer any ability to make me miserable. Now, this takes a huge change of philosophy of life. It means that you don't live for your children's happiness, which you shouldn't. You should not. It's not good for your children, and it is not good for you. I can't tell you how important this subject has become now that I have immersed myself in it for over 2 decades. This notion that I am no happier than my least happy child is wrong. Why? Why should your child determine your happiness? You don't exist? You're not an independent being? Your entire identity is parent? Since when? Did you exist prior to that child? Why don't you exist when the child leaves home, hopefully? Why not? No. This is, whenever I speak, let me tell you, by the way, from whom I learned this. I'm very open on these matters. We Jews are not the only group to think that you live for your children. Every single group in the world does, except for white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Americans. And they're right, and all of us ethnics are wrong. This is a long time in coming. They love their children every bit as much as every Jew, every Greek, every Italian, every Armenian. But they do not define their worth by their children. We do. I mean, the old line that I give, even not talking about happiness, just talking about a whole host of things, it's a very funny story. I mean, it's funny in the upshot. As I walk around, there are a number of cities where I'm recognized. LA, obviously, because I'm on 28 years. It would be very sad if I were on radio 28 years and nobody knew who I was. I mean, it comes with the work. How do I know if somebody walks over to me if they're Jewish or not? There's no way to know, generally speaking, but there is one tip-off. If they tell me what college their kid goes to, I know they're Jewish. Because in the history of humanity, no Gentile has ever told a stranger what college his kid goes to. Never. Now, here is the proof. You all, nearly all, just laughed. When I first told this to a non-Jewish audience, there was no laughter. It went over like the proverbial lead balloon. They didn't know what the hell I was talking about. You mean there are people who tell strangers what college their kid goes to? Wow, that's fascinating. That's just to get, now why is that? We live nachas from the kinder, right? Nachas from, there's no, what is the American WASP equivalent of nachas from the kinder? It doesn't exist. There is no phrase. You're American, you know English just as well as anybody else, you know American slang. There is no phrase. And that is healthier. It doesn't mean that children can't bring some joy, but I take my own parents as a lesson. My mother just died on Rosh Hashanah, and at 89, my father is 91. They were married for 69 years, together 73. There are a number of people here who knew them. And they were the ideal couple. I mean, they lived for each other, totally. And I remember as an adult being so grateful for the fact that their happiness didn't depend on me. I know it's true, if you walked into my mother's house, it looked like a shrine to Dennis. I will admit that. The largest picture ever taken of me takes up the wall of a whole room. It's almost embarrassing because that's the room I slept in when I visited her. You know, I would wake up and see me. It was a little much. But the truth is, I knew that, you know, they were happy with each other. That's where you want happiness from a human, it should be from a spouse. That's where ideally happiness comes from. Lo tov hayot adam levado. It's not good for man to be alone, God said. He didn't say, oh, I will make him children. No, I will make him a wife. It's a very big deal. That sentence, by the way, that sentence alone is worthy of tremendous amount of depth. First of all, the very fact that it was God who said it and not Adam shows how men are a little lost. Just think about that. He didn't come up with that idea. Hey, women, I'm fine. The animals are very interesting. I'll take up zoology. He's a very strange guy. One hopes that most men know on their own that, you know, it's good, it's important. It is not good for me to be alone. Be that as it may, this living through children is a guarantor of misery, because children can never make you happy. What they do is they relieve you of misery. That they can do. No, I'm very serious. If your son is wonderful, your daughter is wonderful, that's not your daily source of happiness. It can't be, and it shouldn't be. We're relying on what cannot provide it. Of course, events provide some, the wedding, a bar mitzvah, and so on. But in daily life, the best thing kids can do for us is take care of themselves. That's the best thing our children can do, is take care of themselves. And their ability to make us miserable exists there, whether or not they mean to do it. I mean, things can happen against their will in tragedy and so on. But this is a great lesson for Jews and other groups to know about not relying on children to make one happy. It doesn't work. And it's bad for the kids. I did not want to be my parents' source of happiness. I did not. That I brought them, I know I brought them happiness, but on a daily, here's the perfect example. My father just lost the partner of his life after 73 years. So my father was telling me on the phone just a few weeks ago, and he, as the first time in my life I ever saw my father cry, and thank God he is crying. I mean, he lost his life when losing my mother. And he said, you know, Dennis, it's so interesting. People come from the shul, and he's very loved in his community in Englewood, New Jersey, really. He and my mother were like the ideal couple, and people loved them. And he said, you know, they come over and they say, well, you know, it's so wonderful. You have wonderful 2 sons, and you have so many wonderful grandchildren, and you have beautiful great-grandchildren. And then my father said to me, he said, of course that's true, but so what? I don't have Hilda. And that's the point. His reaction is right. What, does he go to bed with his grandchildren? Does he talk all day with his great-grandchildren or his children? That he did all day. That's what he had my mother for. The greatest law, there, you know, it's just crazy, you can't compare. The greatest pain is said to be the loss of a child, a very fitting notion, obviously noted here. But when they have measured the greatest loss, it is if you had a good marriage, obviously. If you had a bad marriage, it's wonderful. But, you know, I mean, you know, Let's call a spade a spade. But the greatest loss is the loss of your partner. That is, I mean, no child, if you seek in children what your spouse gave you, you know how, I mean, it's pathologic. It's a pathology. We have to rethink our views on this matter. Now, Jewish life is marriage preoccupied, and that's healthy. I'll never forget when I brought two handsome Catholic priests to a Seder. And they were wearing their priest garb, and still the Jewish women were trying to find a good shidduch for them. It was an amazing thing. I kept kicking them. Celibacy. Have you ever heard of celibacy? By the way, that is a nice Jewish trait, always trying to set people up. That is a nice thing, actually. By the way, I want to give you one more great story you will love about I brought these same two priests to an Orthodox shul many years ago. The one near Hancock Park, but not a Hancock Park shul. And they sat with me, and after about 40 minutes, one of them looked over to me and said, "When do the services begin?" Hamevin Yavin. Everybody was talking so much, they thought services had not started yet. God, was I embarrassed at that moment. Well, they did begin 40 minutes ago, but we're bored. I mean, what am I going to say? When I talk about being happy, or at least acting happy as a moral obligation, I think about both the public and the private sphere. Ask anybody raised by an unhappy parent what it was like, and you immediately will agree with me that happiness is a moral obligation. It is. Being raised by an unhappy parent is a curse. It just is. And so our ability and having an unhappy spouse is unfair. Here is what I say. Here is as directly as I could put it. A bad mood is like bad breath. We don't brush our teeth every day just for health. We do it because we talk to others and we want good breaths. That's why we shower every day. Nothing in health demands that you shower every day. We do so to smell good for others. Body odor and bad mood should be considered the same. Bad breath, the same. You brush away your bad breath, you should brush away your bad mood. If you saw bad moods in the way that I am describing, you would understand if you have a moral obligation to smell good, you certainly have a moral obligation to act good. This notion of I can take out my unhappiness on others is narcissistic and completely destructive and utterly immature. I have no tolerance for the moody. I admit it. I have declared war on the moody, for which the non-moody send me love letters, flowers, gifts, cigars, constantly. Because look, let's be honest, I've done a lot of research. Most marriages are a moody married to a non-moody. Most are. Here's the proof. While I have met a couple of non-moodies married to non-moodies, it exists, but it's pretty rare. I have never once met a moody married to a moody. Now why? I'll tell you why. Because the moody may be moody, but they're not stupid. They never marry one of their own. Never. Think of all the couples you know. There's no moody married to a moody. So, of course, you might ask, why does the non-moody marry the moody? This is a shaila, and tishbi yitaretz kushiot ubayot. This is in the realm of teku. When the Mashiach comes, we may get the glimmer of a response. I have a glimmer of a glimmer. A lot of the happy believe they can make the unhappy happy. So they will rescue the unhappy. They love the person and they will rescue them. And that is a noble piece of nonsense. You cannot make an unhappy person happy by being happy. If anything, they will come to resent your happiness. Why are you happy and I'm not? Life is unfair. That's what will happen. The only person who can make the unhappy happy is the unhappy. The unhappy can make the happy unhappy, but the happy cannot make the unhappy happy. And you can, and there are ways of doing it. First of all, what you do is, if you have a developed conscience, know that what you're doing is immoral. And if I speak to good people on the moral grounds, not happiness, not love, not anything else, just on moral grounds, then they begin to appreciate, well, it isn't fair. Now, here is another thing I want to address to the unhappy. This is of unsurpassing importance. The unhappy think that the happy are happy or act happy because they have had an easier life. There is no truth to that. None. There is virtually no relationship between what happens in people's lives and how happy they act. There are people who are chronically unhappy who have great lives, relatively speaking, and there are people who have had horrible tragedy who have a happy disposition. There is no link. The unhappy people's belief that the happy have had it easier is not true. Not true. Now what I've done, about 15 years of 50 hours a year, 750 hours of happiness on my radio show. People from every walk of life, every background have called. I have had parents who have lost two. I remember the woman who called me up, a woman from Texas who called me up, and she lost both her children in adulthood. One from a premature heart attack, and one from a drunk driver. And you should have heard this woman's disposition. The lack of self-pity. Does she cry at night into her pillow? I bet she does. But nobody in her life, if she wasn't putting on an act for 2 minutes, and I doubt people, it's very hard to act for 2 minutes. And by the way, if you can act for 2 minutes, then you can act for 10 minutes. And if you can act for 10 minutes, you can act for 20 minutes. And I'm telling you to act. That's my whole point. That's the whole point. Lo hamachshava ha'ikar el ha'maaseh. Your son said, I talk from Torah. He's right. It's the greatest single compliment I ever receive from those who know Torah. And I get it's very interesting. Whatever my own workings out of Judaism, I have a huge Orthodox listening audience around the country, and a lot of rabbis included. And they tell me this stuff is pure Torah. And I say, half the time I say it's pure Torah. I always give credit to Judaism as the source of my outlook on this or that or that. I try to have a Kiddush Hashem moment on every show. I don't say this publicly. Most people, including most Jews, wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But in any event, yes, that is right. Judaism says act first. It's my famous story of in 4th grade in yeshiva. I went over to my rabbi. He announced, Rabbi Fostag, may he rest in peace. All right, boys, it's time to daven mincha. I walked over to him, and I always had chutzpah, but I never had disrespect. So respectfully, I said, Rabbi Fostag, I'm not in the mood to daven mincha. Had I said to Rabbi Fostag, Mumba hula wamba chagatumba, it would not have been received with more or less clarity. He knew English well, though he was from Eastern Europe, but I saw he was putting the words together. Nobody had ever put those words together. Finally, he looked at me and he said, Shmuel Prager is not in the mood to daven mincha? So what? Now, I have to be honest, his reaction had no impact on my mincha davening. I have to be honest with you, but it changed my life. You know, what he told me was the best thing a 4th grader could hear. My feelings don't amount to a hill of beans to the rest of the world. What matters is how I act. We have ruined the happiness possibilities of an entire generation, in part thanks to the self-esteem movement, which said that how you think about yourself is very important. It isn't. Hello, it isn't. I pity the 10-year-old who thinks well of himself, who has high self-esteem. I pity him or her, because life will crush them. They will not understand why life is so hard. I am so wonderful. My parents told me how great I was. I got a trophy for playing baseball, even though I ended up in last place. Many of you know my older son, David. I'll never forget. In the Jewish League he played, in a good Prager tradition, his team came in last. And as we did at Yick, if we recall correctly. I mean, and I was part of the problem, I admit it. But you weren't. I was. You were good. You were good. You were good. Anyway, so the kids all got trophies. And I remember saying to David, he was about 10, I said, David, what's the trophy for? He said, for playing. Well, why for playing? I mean, why not just for breathing? To Jerry Schwartz for breathing. You don't get a trophy if you don't win, in my book. That's ridiculous. There's nothing to feel good about yourself. For playing, you don't feel good. It's your obligation to play. You don't feel good about fulfilling obligations. It's an obligation. What Rabbi Fostag said to me is the Jewish lesson which we Jews don't teach because we are more influenced by secular society than we influence secular society. Its inroads have been far greater than ours into it. It's my biggest single lament about Jewish life. We don't give our value. We don't even know which ones to give. This is a great Jewish value, behaviorism. It doesn't matter how you feel, it matters how you act. The only people who care about how you feel are your spouse and your therapist. That's it. And all other 7 billion people only care how you act. That's all they care about. And that's all you care about everybody else. So if you act unhappy and moody, you hurt people because you think that your feelings are more important than anything else. That's all it can mean. All right, I'll anticipate a question now so you don't have to ask it. But if you'd like to, I'll address it a second time. There is a handful of people I know that because of brain chemistry are depressed. That's correct. Fine. And that is correct. To them, I still address this talk to them because you should fight your depression and not pickle it. But if you fight it and you take the drugs and you take the therapy and you work very hard and you still work hard not to take it out on others, okay, I just have Rahmanis. That's true. But the vast majority of people who are moody are not because chemicals make it impossible for them not to be moody. So this is a very clear challenge to the moody on this particular subject. And the way we raise our children to think that their feelings, I'll never forget, I'll use one of my sons when he was very young, about 2 years old. A 5-year-old kid walked over to him in a park near here in Beverly Hills. And he just threw him down. And I wasn't there. His mom was there. And she told me later that I said, well, what did the mother do? Was the mother there? Yeah, the mother ran over to the 5-year-old and said, honey, what's troubling you? And she could not have made it up. I'm sure that's exactly it. See, but frankly, I have even come 180 degrees on this. I would have given the kid a swat on the tush that he would have remembered. You threw down a little child, bang. I know you'll get all the sophisticated responses that just teaches him that violence is the proper response to violence and so on. Fine, you want to get me started on it? You're more than welcome. In the meantime, if you wouldn't be prepared to do that, do something so severe in the non-spanking realm that kid will never forget it as long as he lives, for throwing down a kid and being, practicing how to be a Nazi. This is intolerable. But instead, well, it must be because he has a bad self-image. So let me tell you about self-image. You know who have the best self-images in America? Violent criminals in prison. Roy Baumeister is one of the leading sociologists and criminologists in America, spent his whole life studying criminals. Told me on the show, and I knew it because of his book that I had read on evil. The people with the highest self-esteem are violent criminals. The whole self-esteem movement was pure nonsense. Pure. There is nothing good about it. It's very rare that something is 100% wrong. It was 100% wrong. It doesn't matter if kids have high self-esteem. It does matter. It's bad if they do. The best adults that I know, I ask the adults who do the most good that I know about their childhood, for none of them were they the center of their parents' lives. How's that? That's even more condemning than just the self-centeredness. My parents came to one game that I played in my life. I never expected them to come to any more. I would have felt, frankly, somewhat infantilized if my parents showed up at all my games. I wanted to be a man on my own. And I did. I became a man on my own very early because I wasn't the center of my parents' lives. Everything has been backwards, and we don't produce happier people. When all is said and done, we don't. That's if these people were happy, well adjusted, everything, then I would say I'm wrong. I just go by results. I'll leave you with one thought because I want a lot of time for, I'll leave you with two thoughts actually. One about Ray Fine, the actor, and one about girls. There's a very big danger in the way we raise girls today, and I'll tell you what it is. With boys, we tell them to control their feelings in two areas: violence or aggression and sexuality, right? Every boy is told, keep your hands to yourself, both with regards to fighting, the natural male proclivity to aggression, and the natural male proclivity to touch females that they're attracted to, right? So we tell you, I'm sorry, you can't. No is no, and so on. Where do we tell girls to control their feelings? We don't. By and large, we don't. So girls grow up not with no recipe for happiness, because you cannot be happy if you don't control your feelings, but with a recipe for depression and moodiness, because they have never been taught to control their feelings, and a recipe for contempt for males. Because look, they don't control their feelings. And we don't have to because we are superior, we're female. That was a big message it was a subterranean, if you will, message in much of our education. Females are superior. Men have to control their sexual and aggressive tendencies. Women don't have to control anything. They're just great. But if women don't control their feelings, they're doomed. Because women most women, not all, are emotion factories. And if they allow their happiness to be determined by their feelings at any given moment, they will live a life of a roller coaster. I've often said if men were given a woman's brain for a day, they would be mass suicide. I believe that. Where if women were given men's brains, they would all go, free at last. There's nothing happening. Nothing is going on. This is the best. Wow. Sex and sports. They actually did that. This is one of many studies made about that issue. Both sexes have huge battles to fight. And if only one sex is taught to fight their nature, both sexes are in trouble. The other is the Ray Fine story, which is very powerful. Ray Fine was the Nazi commandant in Schindler's List. In an interview in the New York Times at the time, he revealed something very, very powerful. He said, I couldn't wait till the filming was over. I found that I was acting meaner off camera. Isn't that fascinating? Talk about acting. The guy's paid to act like a Nazi commandant. He has nothing in common with a Nazi commandant. He's Ray Fine. But even as an actor on a paid stage with lighting and cameras, it affects how you act. And I have never sought to get in the Hollywood world. Not out of negative feelings toward it. I just have no great interest in meeting celebrities. There was one actor that I met periodically because I liked him, Charlton Heston. We would have lunch together. May he rest in peace. And I asked him this very question after reading the Ray Fine thing. Did acting as Moses in the Ten Commandments affect you off stage? He said it changed his life. He felt that whenever he walked around, he had to have a certain degree, a demeanor of respectful demeanor, because he acted like Moses. That's what happens. How you act is what matters. That's the great Jewish lesson. So what if you're not in the mood? I wrote a series of articles, talk about guts, that on the sexual matter between husband and wife. If the man is a good man and you love him, periodically say so what with regard to whether you're in the mood or not. Allowing everything to be determined by mood is not a good thing. And yet we live in the age where mood determines everything. Feelings are sacrosanct. Feelings aren't sacrosanct. And I gave this talk. In fact, I gave a talk just last week, 2 weeks ago, for Chabad of Toronto. And one of the 6 points, I made 6 points about things that I learned in yeshiva that have stayed with me in my life with non-Jews. And one of them was this issue of feelings don't matter. So a woman came over to me. She said, I begged my 2 adult children to come and hear you. I love your work, and I wanted my kids, 29 and 27, to hear you. I said, how did they react? Said the 29-year-old boy loved you. My 27-year-old female, she didn't like you at all. I said, what didn't she like? She said, this part on feelings. She said, we have to honor children's feelings. Okay, I said, and then she said to me, you don't have to say anything, Dennis, I screwed up. This was a very open, honest mother. She loves her kids, but she feels she screwed up because she honored her daughter's feelings. Don't honor your children's feelings. There's nothing honorable about most of them. They can have their feelings. You never tell a child you can't have a feeling. It's how you act, my dear child. In my house, I didn't care what grades you got, and it showed. But I did care, for example, about whether or not you complained. You could not complain. When I complained as a kid, I got the old line from generations. I'll bet many of you my age heard this. You keep crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Right? How many parents of my generation said that to their zero, especially if they went to college and got stupid. So it's absolutely nobody. Went to graduate school, it's hopeless. And so nobody says that anymore. But I'm not saying you should use those words, but when a kid learns that whining works, they will learn that whining works. And then you've produced a whiner. And it's as simple as that. So now you know why my life turned around, thanks to Schwartzy and giving one speech to UCLA kids on happiness, and an Italian Catholic at the Red Book magazine changed my life, and I have changed many others. This is not a brag. I have tens of thousands of letters, of emails, tens of thousands. I have almost 750,000 emails, but I have tens of thousands, and those are the only, I haven't read them all. Your happiness hour changed my life. Your happiness hours changed my life. I'm different with my husband. I'm different with my wife. I'm different in raising kids. I wish I had heard this 30 years ago, because it's all common sense. All common sense. So yes, I leave you with happiness is a mitzvah, and I said I would do here's my final religious thought. Religious people who act miserable, I don't mean evil, miserable, are the worst possible advertisements for their religion. So I have an appeal, which may not go over perfectly kosher here, but I will make it anyway. If you are a religious Jew, obviously I say this to religious Christians as well, but they're not here today. If you are a religious Jew and you walk around miserable, it is a sin against God. It's a chilul Hashem, what you're doing. Change. But if you can't change, stop acting religious. Because what you're doing is so hurting. Because anybody will look and say, if that's what, in this case, Judaism, causes somebody to be, I don't want any part of it. Do you know why is Chabad successful? Whatever your feelings toward its theology, toward anything else, why is Chabad is successful? Because they're happy. In fact, it's my theory that if a Chabad rabbi anywhere in the world acts unhappy 2 days in a row, he is sent back to Brooklyn forever. That is correct. That is right. That's back, and he's not allowed out of Brooklyn. I don't know how they keep him in, but they do. That is if you ask any non-frum person what is the distinctive trait of Chabad, it is that they're happy. Are they acting? Of course they're acting. No human is happy every minute. But their acting affects themselves, that's my point. It affects everybody around them, and they think maybe there's something to Judaism if it makes you that happy. And I dare say that right now, at least right now, I'm not speaking for all of Muslim history, the most public Muslims don't radiate a joie de vivre. Is that fair to say? And it's not a very good advertisement for the Quran, is it? That's the point. That's why I'm telling you it is a very interesting thing to diagnose in Orthodox life. Does it make people happier? I'm not giving an answer, but it is not insignificant. It is highly significant. And with that, I thank you for coming and thank you for the honor of this lecture. Thank you, thank you. All right, so it's time for questions, comments, and brief alternate speeches. I'm sorry?
Can happiness be defined?
No, happiness cannot be defined. I wrote that in my book. I have a book on happiness. Happiness is a serious problem. By the way, you could download my happiness hours if this interests you, happiness discs, and so on. It can't be defined. The definition in the dictionary is useless. It just says, something like pleasant feelings. It doesn't mean anything. Yes. You want to stand? Maybe everybody could then hear.
Yes. I have read, although I haven't confirmed it, that Islam has the most new adherents. That people flock to Islam to convert to Islam. So if it's so unhappy, which I also believe it's unhappy, is that true? That it does have the most converts?
Yeah, I would like to see the source of the statement that Islam has the most new converts, and that the new converts came willingly as opposed to under some sort of pressure in an area where many Muslims were living and they wanted to have a better life. In other words, not be harassed. Christianity has enormous new converts in Africa. In fact, in the lifetime of many here, there will undoubtedly be an African pope. Africa is becoming the center of Christianity since Europe has given it up in favor of more vacation hours. That's the religion of Europe. And so I don't know if that statistic is true, but again, remember, there are 1 billion Muslims, so you are going to get a certain number of people, and there undoubtedly, there are Muslims in various places who are undoubtedly terrific. But that's why I was very careful. I said the best known Muslims, they get on television or anywhere, they don't radiate a joy of life. And obviously the extremists, the least. But no extremists in general are, which is why I say happiness is so important. No extremists radiate a joy of life. I don't think Neturei Karta strike you as the happiest Jews around either. Yeah.
Recently you had a man named Arthur Brooks on your show, and he was talking about, you wrote a book on happiness, and it got me curious. I started to read this book. I just read a few pages, but he talks about the different kinds of happiness. And one of them, I think, is according to Aristotle, it's more like a moral conscience, that if your conscience can be at rest, that's a truly happy person. And so he was saying how you could be depressed and yet be truly happy if you feel good about how you behave towards other people. What's your take?
Oh, I think that's entirely right. It's just like if I ask any of you when you have the flu, are you healthy? Your answer should be, right now I have the flu, but I'm a very healthy person. That's what one should answer in difficult times in life, if possible. I'm not including Auschwitz. I mean, nothing applies in every instance, although the odds are there were Jews who somehow, I don't know, maintained some sort of demeanor. But Auschwitz is sui generis. But you should be able to say, I'm going through a very terrible period right now in terms of my pain, but I am a happy person. Just as I am going through a terrible health crisis, but I am a happy person.
By the way, just as a follow-up about the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl has said that he would rather be the person being beaten than the Nazi beating the Jew. So even though he's suffering, there's a sense of contentment because he's
right.
A good guy.
Well, Viktor Frankl wrote one of the other 10 books that most affected my life. Anybody over here? Yes.
My brother here and I are in Yeshiva Flatbush Graduate School, and Joseph Telushkin went to school with that Torah Media Lead cousin. when you were talking, I was thinking about Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who also talked about happiness, finding joy, and even thanking Hashem for adversity, which he had a lot of in his life. And even as he was dying in his late 30s, he told his followers to pray like his little grandson, who was praying so hard to Hashem to give his grandpa life. I went to that, from that to thinking that my family act as advocates for reuniting children with their, let's say, non-custodial parents. And we have discovered that throughout our country and much of the world, children are being kept from, very often now it's their fathers, good, confident, loving fathers. And the children so often are heartbroken. I mean, the courts are trafficking in children because so many people are making money off them. When children come to you and say that they're heartbroken, and I've seen this so many times in the Jewish community and overall community, because they're not able to see a parent, particularly fathers these days, what do you say? What do you do? What can you do?
Don't start me. Well, it's really worthy of its own lecture. Through my radio show, I have come across and known in my personal life examples of that. It's semi-related. It's not entirely related to. It's semi-related in this way, where you have, and it's usually a mother, sometimes it's a father after a divorce, who is so angry at the father that she feels that she can take poison or alienate the children from the father. That's her way of getting back at him. To use human beings as your emotional cannon fodder, I think there's a special place in the hereafter for these people. I do. If God is good, these people are punished. But my bigger anger is that a society and a law system that allows it, that you can manipulate the legal system with the right amount of money to get the verdict that you want. And everybody is crushed. And I believe even after all is said and done, when the kids grow up, they will not even admire the mother for having done it. Yes, please. You want to stand? Only because I'll hear you better.
Usually we say V'adat et Hashem besimcha. And what does it mean? It doesn't mean that you wear pink glasses and looking to the world through pink glasses, but actually that's why we say modani. If you see the light, even in the harsh moments of your life, you can elevate from the physicality into spirituality and into the holiness for Ahavat Hashem.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you for that comment. So I'll repeat questions, but comments I'll let live. Yes?
Can you expand on the happiness in terms of the socioeconomic realm? I think you spoke about it last week.
Happiness in the socioeconomic realm, they have, that's separate. So let's begin with economic. By socioeconomic, people usually mean your social economic status in life. But if it's not what you meant, tell me. But people ask about money, if that's what you're asking. Okay, the answer on money, almost everyone who has studied the subject knows. There is a certain level of abject poverty that increases unhappiness. However, beyond that, it is very rare that money increases happiness, and here is my take on it. Money makes the already happy happier, and the already unhappy unhappier. And I'll explain why. If you are happy and you gain money, wonderful. It will help you do more things. It will give you more security. It will give you whatever you want to do. You're happy, and now you have more ability to even do things. Great. The unhappy who think that money will bring them happiness, get that money, find out that they're just as unhappy as they were before, and now they are more unhappy because the thing they thought would make them happy, more money, didn't. So that's exactly what happens. Happy lottery winners stay happy, unhappy lottery winners get unhappier. and plus lose all their friends. So they're really doomed. Yes?
You alluded at the beginning of your talk to Europeans, the distinction between Europeans and Americans and unhappiness. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, the distinction between Europeans and Americans, for about 100 years, Europeans have looked at Americans as far more superficial than they. They are more cultured, which is true. They are more cultured. And I'm very cultured, and I have disdain for the European emphasis on culture, which is higher than on morality and certainly higher than on happiness. So it is true, the average European could identify Matisse and Haydn. The average American could not. And to which my response is, so what? And I say that as one who was actually writing an essay on Haydn, who is my favorite composer, has been for over 40 years. I've conducted Haydn, and he is like the secret weapon in my happiness arsenal. But nevertheless, having said that, I know many happy people who never heard a piece by Haydn and wouldn't know a Matisse from a Jackson Pollock. Though they should, because Jackson Pollock is a fraud. I mean, it's unbelievable. The man stood on a ladder and poured paint from paint cans, and it sells for tens of millions of dollars. You talk about a naked emperor. My view is, if I could do it, it's not art. No, it's a valid view. It takes no skill. But they have the belief, because they go to museums far more than Americans do, that they are a higher form of culture. But the Nazis appreciated classical music more. Auschwitz had a chamber orchestra. You know that. They would play Strauss waltzes, accompanying Jews to the death chambers. And, Wagner was an idol, literally an idol in Nazi Germany. Mozart, they went crazy for Mozart. It bothered me a lot as a kid that Hitler and I would both cry at the same piece by Schubert. It bothered me. But how could it be? Because beautiful music is beautiful music. It's like Hitler was made cold by cold weather, and I'm made cold by cold weather. Beautiful music is beautiful music to scumbags and to beautiful people. That's the way it is. So I came to a very sobering conclusion, given my love of the arts. They don't make you better. They may make you deeper, but they don't make you better. It is possible to be a very good person and not ever heard any classical music. I think you'll be a richer person for loving classical music. I do believe that deeply. But knowing that the Nazis loved classical music was a very sobering moment for me. Anyway, the American joy, jazz was superficial, Frank Sinatra, superficial. Now, the truth is, modern American stuff like rap is crap. I mean, it is definably crap. It's very sad what has happened, and some of the heaviest of the heavy metal. I mean, I can appreciate the fact one of my dearest friends in life, who I consider a tzaddik, loves heavy metal. So I've had to understand, one of the nice things being a talk show host is you meet everybody. This is one of my favorite stories. I can't stand tattoos. Jewishly and non-Jewishly, I can't stand tattoos. Okay. I was standing tattoos. T-A-T-T-O-O. Anyway, I was standing in Hollywood waiting for friends of mine to pick me up to go to the Hollywood Bowl about 8 years ago. And next to me, standing on the same corner, was a young man, I'd say about 19, 20, 21, completely tattooed. He was like a walking billboard. And rings where I didn't think one could actually insert rings. He defied physiological laws. And he kept looking at me. And, I must admit, I started getting a little self-conscious. What is this guy up to? Finally, he actually walks up to me, says, "Are you Dennis Prager?" And I swear I thought of saying, I'm his cousin. So many people confuse me with that jerk. But I figured, I'm going to give it the old try. And I said, yeah, I am Dennis Prager. Man, I love you. It was a very moving moment for me, because I still hate tattoos. I adopted my producer's view on who to root for in the NBA. You know how he roots? Alan Estrin roots for the team with the fewest tattoos. That has been my rule since I heard that. Having said that, there are wonderful people with tattoos, and there are wonderful people who love heavy metal and all of that. So I do understand that. But Europeans believed culture defined you, and that happy, uncultured Americans were beneath contempt. We bailed them out of 2 wars and the Cold War. We did. Freedom exists on earth because of the United States of America, with all their jazz lovers. Anyway, okay, yes.
Dennis, do you make a distinction between looking at happiness as a goal rather than as a byproduct? For instance, if you focus on things, on doing things that make you happy, rather than just being obsessed all day long with being happy as a goal.
Oh, absolutely, yes. But you have to be obsessed with acting happy all your awakened hours. That's what I owe to my wife, to my children, to my parents, to my friends, to my audience. That I owe it to the person in the elevator. You're lucky if you're in an elevator with me. I am the happiest. What do most people do in the elevator? First of all, they don't talk. What do? They stare at the lighted numbers. And I often will say, folks, I bet you 6 is next. What is everybody staring at? It's going to trick them? It's going to go from 6 to 8? So I horse around. Now, by the way, 1 out of 10 look at me like I'm Jack the Ripper. I understand that. So be it. If they're that paranoid, that's fine. The other 9 out of 10, I made their day a little happier. I think it's a mitzvah to make people's days a little happier. That's what I want to leave you with. God bless you for having me. Thank you. Baruch tiyeh, Baruch tiyeh.
We had a Breslov clustered speak here Shabbos afternoon. Isn't that what Nachman said? It's a mitzvah to go. It's a great mitzvah. I think what he meant to be saying, by the way, Dennis, is it's a challenge. It's a mitzvah gedolah. We usually don't say gedolah about a mitzvah. Lios b'simcha tamid is not an easy level to arrive at, but it is a mitzvah gedolah. And I was looking through which parak I should say. And I'm going to say a parak that you know very well, but maybe you don't pay attention to the translation. Shir hamalos b'shuva dinoi b'shiva sion hayinu kecholmin. Az yimalei sechot pinu u'l'shonenu rina. Oz yomru v'agoyim. Higdil adonai la'asos imele. Higdil adonai la'asos imonu. Hayinu semechin. Shuva adonai yeshivisenu kafikim b'negel. Hazorim b'dima v'rina yiksoru. Holo chelech uvacho. Nosei meshach hazara. Bo yavo b'rina. Nosei alumasa. A song of ascents. When the Lord brought back the exiles of Zion, we were like the people who dream. Then were our mouths filled with laughter, and our tongues with songs of joy. Then was it said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord did do great things for us, and we rejoiced. Bring back our exiles, Lord, like streams in dry land. May those who sowed in tears reap in joy. May the one who goes out weeping carry a bag of seed, come back with the songs of joy, carrying his sheaves.
Amen. Skadavi, Skadash, Merava. Amen. Yamad Brach, Mechapate, Akhanik, Chopik Israel. Agalam is my career. Amen. Shabbat, Barbie, Kramali, Hazeg. Ita Darby, Kaleli, Talashmet, Kushabri, Elami, Kober Patab, Shuratash, Patab, Natmatada, Rabbi Amat, Vimru, Amen. Shalom, Shmaya, Chaim, Alena, Vako, Israel, Vimru, Amen. Seshalom, Vimru, Math, we are Seshalom, Alena, Vako, Israel, Vimru, Amen.
since we were told that action is really the most important thing, Jews do one act better than everyone else we eat. Please join us for the brunch